Good morning and happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope you are having a fabulous day already. I know some of you have been at it for a while and some of you are just getting started. If you are just stumbling on my page for the first time, my name is Donna. I am a wellness advocate, a jazzerciser, a runner, a grad school student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, an activewear boutique owner, have a chapter in a best-selling compilation of amazing women who have overcome incredible odds. And I started Wellness Wednesday because I've been in a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression. I consider myself to be in recovery right now, but never fully recovered. I started Wellness Wednesday because I know that peer support is extremely important. And when we share our tips and successes with others, as well as our failures, we can often learn quite a bit from each other. And if you see me looking distracted, it's because I have beautiful hummingbirds hanging out at the feeders outside my window, which makes me very happy. And the reason you usually see me like this is because I'm either coming from or going to a workout. In this case, today it's yoga because my legs are not very happy with me after a run and a jazzercise workout that was leg focused yesterday. So here we are. I'm also a little bit earlier than usual. So if you're here, let me know you're here. And if you don't see this until afterwards, drop a comment, ask a question, hit hashtag replay in the comments so that I know you saw it. And if you have questions about anything that you don't want to comment, don't hesitate to message me, especially if you have an idea for a topic you'd like to see me cover in the future, because I love to learn. And sometimes it takes me a little while to think of things, make sure that there's things I haven't covered. And I love to have that input, especially if it's a topic that can help you. I do try to stay away from politics and negativity. Well, I absolutely stay away from politics. I would just love to learn a little, and especially if it's something that can help you. So if you do normally follow my page, I hope you enjoyed last week's video on self-advocacy. If you didn't see it, let me know. I will be happy to drop a link to it in the comments, or you can go backwards on my page and it'll be sitting there just waiting for you to watch. You can also go to the videos tab on my page and check out all of my videos, most of which are Wellness Wednesday. Some are other random things. And I just wanted to, I wanted to remember to say that sometimes Facebook doesn't show me all the things. So if you're here and you say hi or you ask a question and I don't acknowledge it or respond, it's more than likely because Facebook didn't show it to me, in which case I will definitely respond or acknowledge after I'm done. Okay, so let's get started because I'm actually on time today. Woo! Okay, so the thing is about self-advocacy, which is what last week's was about, is that it can be hard to reach the point of self-advocacy when it feels like you or everything around you is falling apart. And this was actually not the topic I was going to talk about this week. I was actually going to do something else. And then all of a sudden this just kind of came out of nowhere. And it reminded me of a few interesting things when I was exploring this topic and getting it ready for today. So again, when life is easy, everything seems easy. And when it's hard, everything seems hard. But how can we help ourselves get out of that faster? Get out of that trap faster when everything seems all bad, or when we feel like everything is lost or like we're in a black hole? Well, black hole is often a word I've used to describe depression, or when I'm slipping into that super anxiety mode. And I'm fortunate in that in the last several years, I experienced 1 year of extremely profound personal growth. I've always been in a state of personal growth, but I experienced 1 year of extremely profound personal growth. And found that I was able to, when I find myself at the edge or creeping up on the edge of that black hole, there are some things that just make it possible for me to kind of drag myself back before I fall in. And whatever it is that's causing that, a lot of the same principles apply, even if it's uniquely different situations. So what does that look like? It might start with a loss or an illness or a financial catastrophe. And it seems like when one of those things happens, sometimes it seems like everything compiles. A lot of things that are out of our control compile and just build on it. And then next thing we know, we feel like our whole life is out of control. Our whole world, like the rug's been pulled out from underneath us. And sometimes that can just be because we're so focused on this one major negative thing that has happened that it changes how we perceive everything that comes behind it. Or sometimes it's just simply because, there's a lot of old sayings out there. Things come in threes. When it rains, it pours. Whatever you choose to believe, but perception is a lot of that. So it, like I said, it may start with a loss or an illness. By loss, I mean not necessarily just losing someone, a loved one, to death, but this could look like loss of a long-time job or career. This could look like loss of a home, loss of a lot of different things. It can look like losing contact with a loved one, having an argument with a loved one that completely severs contact, or something happening that takes that loved one away from you. So any of those can look like a loss. Good morning, Miss Carla. And then, like I said, things sometimes seem to compile out of behind that, things that are out of our control. And no matter what the loss is, even if it's not the loss of a person or the loss of someone to death, the stages of grieving that were coined by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross still apply. Anytime you experience a loss, like I said, loss of a home, loss of contact with a loved one, even if they haven't passed away, loss of a friendship, the death of a relationship, a breakup, whatever. The stages of grieving still come into play. And those are pretty much denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, which are also the 5 stages of death. They kind of go together. They're synonymous. And you don't always go through those stages in a linear fashion, in a chronological fashion. Sometimes we bounce around. We start with denial. We enter into anger. We may skip bargaining and go straight to depression and then find ourselves back in denial. There's a lot of times that you can move sporadically through these stages. But like I said, whatever that loss is, whatever that major event is that has caused you to feel like the rug's been pulled out from underneath you, or like your whole life is out of control, even if it's different from the person next to you, a lot of the same principles apply. A lot of the same feelings and emotions apply. And therefore, a lot of the same ways to deal with it apply as well. Y'all, I need a haircut. In any case, so when it feels like things are falling apart, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, are you in mortal danger? Is any of this putting you in physical mortal danger at that time? Because if it's not, then you can step back from it. And I know that sounds pretty extreme, but we have a tendency, especially in the throes of stress, to exaggerate our situations. And I have an example of that, of what I'm talking about. But if we're not in mortal danger, if it's not something that is going to be life or death in the next 10 minutes, 30 minutes, day, then we have the time and the ability, if we choose, to step back from it a little bit to gain some perspective. An example I have of this, the exaggeration of a situation, is when my daughter got in her first car accident, which was about a month after she started driving by herself. And I have a tendency to feel others' emotions anyway, but this was back in a time where I wasn't necessarily as in control of the things that I absorbed as I am now. So I got this phone call and she was very upset, and it had literally happened less than half a mile from my office. And when she first got on the phone, she was very upset, stressed out. I could hear it in her voice right away. She was okay. She was not injured, but her car was totaled. But it affected my day as if I had been in the accident myself, because I was so immediately stressed and freaking out about my daughter, even though she was safe, even though the car wasn't in such great shape, but she was safe. We had a towing company. We didn't live that far away. There was no immediate danger for her. It was done. It was over. But I allowed that to impact my entire day as if I had been. I cried and I freaked out and I panicked and I worried about something that was not a mortal danger. It was not a mortal danger in that minute. In that moment, she was safe. She was uninjured. The police were coming. The person that hit her was staying there to make sure everything, there were witnesses. There was a way for her to get home. There was no reason for me to be freaking out the way I was in that moment. Yes, there was a lot to worry about what was going to happen after that, but not anything that could be controlled in that moment. Hey, Miss Ann, nice to see you. So that's an example of exaggerating the situation. And actually, in that case, I was making the whole thing much worse than it needed to be for myself and for my daughter, because I was firing questions at her and replaying the event, asking her to replay the event by text, by phone. So that's what I mean by, are you in mortal danger and are you exaggerating your situation? So that is the first thing. The next thing is to breathe. If you are not in mortal danger, you need to get out of it, right? But if you're not in mortal danger, then you have a moment to sit back and breathe and just calm yourself down. Step outside if you're at work. Walk around the building. Go outside your house. Walk around the house. Go hide in your bedroom, whatever. You have the opportunity to take the time to breathe. And breathing is often something we forget. It's the most simplest thing, but it is also one of the things that we forget the most when we're in the throes of stress and freaking out, is to just stop and breathe. All those years that you've been hearing, and a lot of what I say is going to be things you've heard before, but sometimes, just like kids, we need that repetition to hear it over and over and over again to remind us and to stay on top of it. So there is a lot to be said for taking a deep breath and counting to 10. Whether it's because you're angry, you're upset, you're about to lose your noodle, and cry, whatever the situation may be, a lot of times perspective can change just by slowing down, stepping into a corner, closing a door, and breathing. So that's super important. And then you have to evaluate what you can control and focus on that. In this case, this example I gave of my daughter's accident, there was absolutely nothing that wasn't happening already that I could control. The sheriff's office had been called. There was a tow truck on the way. She already had a ride back to our house. She was not injured. There was absolutely nothing else I could do in that moment. The accident was being reported to the insurance company. There was nothing I could do but wait. So when I finally did get control of myself, and it was kind of an off and on thing all day long, because I kept replaying what happened in my head according to what she told me, and what could have happened, and what should have happened, and all of these things that it was already, yes, okay, Carla, I'm so glad that I'm not the only one that experienced that. But all of that was stuff I was inflicting on myself, and probably making my daughter more miserable in the process. Good morning, Miss Danielle. Because there was absolutely nothing that wasn't already happening that could be controlled. So again, evaluate what you can control and focus on it. I finally settled down and turned my focus to work. Now, was that the moment to start a huge complicated project? No, but there were other menial daily tasks that I could participate in that distracted me, so that I would stop, like I said, going on replay, and just freezing myself. It was almost, like I said, it was almost like I had been in the accident myself, because I kept putting all this stuff on replay and I was experiencing the fight or flight or freeze response over and over and over again. And I just couldn't seem to pick a thing and do it, because I was so caught up in the cycle. So evaluate what you can control and focus on. Sometimes it's the simplest things. Whatever the situation is, if you're at home, maybe you're struggling to even just get yourself in the shower. And hygiene, self-care, those things are important. If you have something major happening, but you're responsible at work, then you might just need to focus on getting through the day if, for example, you're the only one there and can't get away. If it's something serious, even if you're the only one there, maybe it means that you've got to talk to your superiors and put a sign on the door that says, due to unforeseen circumstances, the office is closed. I've had to do that before, and there's also been times where I couldn't do that. So, which is what's going to bring me to my next thing. So again, Focus on what you can control and what you absolutely have to do to muscle through. Hygiene is one of those small things you can control. If you can't get out of work, you can focus on maybe less important menial tasks that are still where you're still being productive, but you're not going to screw anything up because of your state of mind. Maybe getting through the day just looks like, or getting through it just looks like getting up and making sure the kids have food and baths and then get started on their homework. Or, if it's a really bad day, then plant them in front of the TV, even if that's not something you like to do. Send them outside to play if there's a safe place to do that, where you can just keep an eye on them, in the backyard through a window. But you need to take time. And sometimes that's not always possible right away. So when my grandmother died a few years ago, I was in a situation at my job, and it was nobody's fault. Not really. There's a lot of situations and circumstances I could have pointed at, but it was really nobody's fault. There was a major event coming up, and I was the only employee at the time. So when I was notified that my grandmother was probably in her last moments, I could not get away because I was the only one that could do certain pieces of this upcoming event. And it was not, when I say upcoming, it wasn't in a week or 2 weeks. It was literally like that day. And in 2 days, it was in pieces. So it was very, very difficult. And I was not in a position where I could take a break other than when I got the news to walk outside and breathe and cry and go in the bathroom and cry and then pull myself together, because I had things that had to be done and nobody else could do them. And even if somebody else was willing to, in the time it would have taken me to show them what to do, I could have done it myself. So it was just one of those ugly situations where I couldn't break away and I couldn't take the time I needed. So I went into muscle through mode, which unfortunately sometimes we're in a situation, let's face it, we're adults. Sometimes we don't have a choice and we have to muscle through things even in the worst of our moments. So I pulled myself together and I muscled through. Where that became problematic was that even when I was at home in and around these combined events, I wasn't allowing myself to feel, because the moment I allowed myself to feel, I knew I was just going to fall apart. My grandmother was probably one of the closest family members to me, the one that I felt the most bonded with. I was carrying a lot of guilt for not having gone down to see her because she had dementia. And I know I'm not the only one that struggles to go visit someone that doesn't remember them and to see them in a form that we'd prefer not to see them in. So I wasn't allowing myself to feel. And there was a lot of strange things that were going on around that time. But I had to muscle through about 4 days. Because this was a Thursday and I wasn't done with the things that needed to be done until Sunday, and there was really no one else that could do them. So what ended up happening was, even though I couldn't take the break, by the time I walked into work the following Monday and the pressure was off, I couldn't hold it together. I was in there about an hour and I had to make the phone calls and say, I got to take a couple days off. So we had to close the office. So it's important to recognize, if you have the ability to take the time, whatever that looks like, if it means asking grandma to take the kids, or asking a close friend to have a play date so that you can have time and space alone. If it means that you have to muscle through and then make sure you take time afterwards, or if it is something that's, okay, Carla, it's not showing me your whole message, so I'll have to read the rest of that afterwards. But I can only imagine, because that was 911 was an event that had a massive impact on everyone in that moment. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of that in a little bit. So in any case, whatever you have to do to take the time. So if you're in a situation where you're dealing with something major that just feels like the rug's been pulled out from under you, and you have the ability to take the time off, some people are like, oh, I need to work, it'll keep me distracted. But sometimes that just delays the inevitable, which is that you're going to lose your noodle at some point. And I pardon the phrase, it's just kind of a funny way for me to put a little bit of light on a very serious subject. So when I say lose your noodle, I mean crying uncontrollably, screaming, just completely having a meltdown, if you will. And when you muscle through things you don't have to, when you're muscling through anything, you're just postponing that moment. You really are. Especially if you're muscling through things you don't have to, then a lot of times it gets even uglier. So if you have the ability, if you can look at your work schedule, and you can say, okay, this is going on. I need some time. I'm going to take these next 2 days off. Then you need to do it. And I know that's hard for a lot of us because we feel guilty depending on what our responsibilities are. But if it's not anything that's going to be damaged or life altering for anybody, if it's put off a couple days or a week, then take the time. It's really important to take the time. So again, focus on what you can control and take the time that you need and the space that you need to do whatever you need to do, whatever that looks like to deal with your personal catastrophe, whatever's going on. And again, allow yourself to feel when you can, and as soon as you can, allow yourself to feel it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to analyze it. Don't try to fix it. Just feel it. You're grieving. You don't have to justify your emotions. And I know that's very difficult for a lot of us, especially those of us that suffer from depression and anxiety. We have to find a way to blame it on ourselves. We have to find a way to take responsibility. We have to find a way to judge ourselves and dissect it. And that's not necessary. Part of a mindfulness practice, which I've talked about before, and mindfulness cognitive behavior therapy is being in the moment and allowing yourself to feel without judging yourself or labeling it or trying to analyze it or fix it immediately. So what that means is when you have that time to feel, it's okay to wallow a little bit. It's okay to wallow. You can lay on the couch and you can sob. You can, binge on unhealthy food and while you binge watch your favorite movie that you know is going to make you cry so that you can get it out, so you can have that cathartic release. Listen to music that does the same thing. But set time limits. Give yourself permission to be sad, but still fulfill those minimum responsibilities that you have to others or to yourself, if you can, so that you are not stewing there for too long. That sadness, especially if it's something like a loss, is probably going to continue. But if you wallow in it for too long, you can actually perpetuate the pain. So it's okay to wallow. It's okay to take that time and allow yourself to feel. Don't unpack and live there, I think is probably the most popular saying you've probably heard. And one of the ladies that had a blog that I looked at for this talked about setting time limits, that she had to set time limits for herself of how long she was allowed to do what she needed to do in that wallow space, if you will. And that she give her, for example, as time went on, she gave herself permission to be sad when she was home, but she had responsibilities at work. So when she was at work, she put on the brave face and she muscled through and dealt with everything when she got home. How many of us do that on a daily basis without even really thinking about it? But then when something major happens, we're just like, I don't know what to do. So all of those things are things you can do. But the time is necessary. You're going to have to take the time sooner or later to feel your feelings. Okay. So, present moment. This is really important. And this goes back to that accident I was speaking about. Avoid replays and predictions. A lot of times that anxiety loop that we get in our head has to, yes, don't unpack and live there. And it's funny because this is a saying I hear, Carla, probably once a week, but still have to be reminded of it on a regular basis, which is why I say, even if you watch every video I ever do and you hear some of the same things over and over and over again, it might be like the time 1050 that it finally clicks for you. So yes, some of this is repetitive, but sometimes we need that to learn. So you got to stay in the present moment. One of the things that gets us in the anxiety loop is the replays and predictions and walking through what we think is going to happen next. And that's that attempt to control. One of the things that gets us stuck in the depression loop is rumination, repeating the same scenarios over and over again, trying to figure out how we're to blame or what we could have done differently. So it's important, and that's another point to the focusing on the small things in front of you that you can control, is to keep yourself from getting into that repeat scenario where that brain loop is just going and going and going, and you can't move because of it. You can't make decisions, you can't move, you can't breathe. And you can also let people in. Another tip is to let people in and let them help. You can talk to someone you trust. You may need to give them a disclaimer. Hey, I just need you to listen. I don't need any advice right now, but can you just listen? I need to get this off my chest. I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of immediately wanting to fix. And sometimes I have to be told, and I've even told my daughter, if you just need me to listen, say so. You have to tell me sometimes, because she's my daughter. Plus, I'm a fixer. I want to fix things. I want to make people feel better. So you take that and you compound it with the fact that she's my daughter, and pretty much anything she tells me, I'm going to be like, well, what about this? Did you try that? What about this? And, well, did you think about that? So sometimes I need to be reminded, good morning, Miss Ann, that sometimes people just need a sounding board. They don't need somebody else to sail in with suggestions or advice or fix-its or anything like that. So let people in. Give that disclaimer if you need to. And sometimes you need to let them help. I don't mean by advice. I mean by just what I talked about a few minutes ago. If you need space and you need grandma to watch the kids so that you can have that space, or friend, especially if they're offering, let them help. We are so proud all of the time. And part of the reason that we end up in the states we end up in, good morning, Miss Sharon, is because we won't accept help or ask for help when we need it. Oh, thank you, Miss Anna, you too. And you do so much to help others that you just don't even know about. Anyway, you just made my day, Miss Ann. Thank you. In any case, you have to sometimes let them help. So if you have a friend that's like, hey, do you need me to take the kids to the beach for a little while? Let them. If they're offering, don't just assume you're burdening them by doing so. We have a tendency to get into that brain loop, and we think that because of everything that's going on, we can't burden anybody else with it. So let people in, talk to them, even if you have to give that disclaimer. And if they're offering to help, or if you need help and they're in a position to do it, let them help. Let them help. Now, if that's not possible for you, if it's not possible to let somebody in, if it's not possible, good morning, Miss Sharon. If it's not possible to do that, if you can't bring yourself to accept that help, or if you can't bring yourself to ask for the help, write it out. I can't stress this enough. If you can't talk, write it down. Journal it. Write a letter. Get on your computer and type furiously. Like when I do that, I think of, if you've ever seen Bruce Almighty and he's trying to answer all those prayers, after God's turned over, like, a small quarter of one county to him, and his fingers are just flying on this keyboard. And that's what I think of. So write it out. If you're not a writer, type it out. Type a letter. Open a Word document and just go to town. There's journal apps now. There's one of the iPhone updates. Oh, my phone's right here. One of the iPhone updates that came through not long ago, all of a sudden a journal app appeared on my phone. I haven't used it. I don't know what it is. I haven't checked it out yet, but there are journal apps. There are journal apps that you can get with passwords so you can protect your thoughts. If you're like me, if you're an old school writer, then get a notebook with just lines in it and go to town. Like I said, write a letter. If you can't talk, if you're not in a place where you can articulate to someone what you're dealing with, then write it out. That is a great way to do it. Self-care. I can't stress this enough. This is always going to be one of the number one important things to me. Self-care. So evaluate and meet your basic needs as much as possible. And we kind of touched on this already. Sleep, nourishment. Sometimes we're in the throes of stress. We struggle to eat. Drink a shake. Take in something, even if you don't feel like it, that's going to nourish your body, because the less you eat and the less you sleep, the more your emotions and mental health are going to be affected, and the more it's going to, it is a circle. It is a circle. The more it's going to perpetuate. So the event or the mental illness or whatever the case may be affects your appetite and your motivation to work out or take care of yourself or get in the shower. And then when you don't do that, you feel even worse. And it just keeps, you see what I mean? It just keeps perpetuating. So self-care is super important. You've got to evaluate and meet your basic needs as much as possible. You need to try to sleep, even if it's just 30 minutes laying down with your eyes closed with the intention of taking a cat nap and you never actually get to sleep. You would be surprised how restful that can actually be if you're just laying there with your eyes closed, resting for 30 minutes. Sleep, nourishment, water, drink water. Dehydration can cause all kinds of problems. Prayer, whatever your beliefs are, if there's prayer involved or meditation, those are things that you can do. If you have a hobby that allows you to just kind of disappear into yourself, I know a lot of people are very crafty. They make quilts. I have so many amazing people in my VIP group that do so many amazing things. If that's something, then go in and sew something. Some people bake when they're upset. If I'm angry and I can't articulate it, I clean. I'm sure there's times where people around me that have lived with me have wished I was angry all the time. I'm just saying, because when I feel like things are totally out of control and I'm angry, I clean. I start going through piles of stuff. But that self-care is really important. And self-care doesn't have to be expensive. Self-care doesn't mean taking a vacation overseas. Like in the movie The Holiday, Cameron Diaz experiences a breakup. And yes, rage cleaning. That's a perfect way to put it, Danielle. Cameron Diaz experiences a breakup, so she decides she's going to take a holiday in England from California. It doesn't have to look like that. Self-care doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't have to look like a $200 or $300 day at the spa. It can look like a bubble bath. It can look like I have a really nice closet. And one of these days, Eric suggested one of these days that I do a little tour of my closet on a Wellness Wednesday. I have a really nice closet that he built for me before I moved in. Sometimes I need to just go sit in the closet. I go sit in the closet. It's big. It's got a bench seat. It's a very functional space. I meditate there. I pray there. Sometimes I need to go sit in the closet. You know what I mean? Just be by myself because it's my space. So self-care can look a lot of different ways, but it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be, like I said, it can be a bubble bath. It can be a walk outside in nature, at a local park, whatever. It can be hiding in your closet. It can look like a lot of that things. I know that sounds terrible, hiding in the closet, but again, we'll have to visit my closet another day. So again, self-care, super important. Evaluate and meet your basic needs. Sometimes I need a couple hours to rattle around in my own space where I'm not on anybody's schedule, where I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to do anything. I can do what I want. Sometimes just an hour, 2 hours of that makes a huge difference. And then find a release. Within that self-care, find a release. Exercise. Y'all, I can't stress this enough either. Exercise, we need to move our bodies. Physical release is super important. The turnaround with my anxiety really didn't start until I started running. I'm not going to tell you got to run. And then it became even more so when I started running and then started changing my diet to fuel the runs better. I'm not telling you have to run, but a physical outlet out in the garden, digging a ditch, planting plants, raking leaves, taking a walk, walking up and down your steps. I used to do that for exercise. Just walk up and down a set of steps I had. Had some of the best legs ever because of that. A physical release. Punch a pillow. I already said go outside. Another thing I used to do, listen, sometimes you just got to scream. I had a very frustrating day at work, or a day at work where I was busy, but there was major personal stuff going on that I couldn't pay attention to, that was just running and running and running in the back of my head while I muscled through the things. And I would get in my vehicle at the end of the day and put the windows up and turn the radio on. And I would literally just sit there and scream at the top of my lungs in my vehicle. Usually nobody was around. Pretty sure nobody ever heard me. Pretty sure nobody ever saw me because, you know, I probably looked like that painting. You know what I mean? The screen painting. But that kind of catharsis sometimes can just be huge. So try it sometimes. Get in your vehicle, shut the windows, shut the doors, and just scream out loud. Just scream out loud. But like I said, find a way to channel your anger, your sadness, or pain into a project. Good morning, Miss Brenna. Into a project or into a craft or into a hobby or whatever. Nature, I've already touched on this a couple times. Can't stress enough. And I've been watching documentaries on the Native American community for school. Long story. But they really commune with nature. And I can tell you from personal experience that if I go for a run in the park, like over at Whispering Pines Park, which is one of my local parks, if you're not local to me, if I go for a run in the park, in the woods, versus a run on the road in my neighborhood, it's a completely different experience. Completely different experience. And I find that it just opens up parts of me for appreciation and gratitude that just can't be beat. There's a lot of science behind getting out in nature, rooting yourself in the ground, walking barefoot. When Brenna saw, Brenna, you're so funny. When Brenna saw what I was going to be talking about today, she suggested a song by her favorite band, which is Blue October, called Into the Ocean, that I should start this episode with that song playing. And I actually forgot about it. And then she just said that she heard it start playing on her way to work. So she just popped in to say hi. So if you like looking at different kinds of music, Into the Ocean by Blue October is actually one of my favorite songs by them. And there's some great message in there, and some pretty deep feeling. In any case, so nature, there's a lot of science behind getting yourself grounded in nature, working in nature, getting out in the sunlight, fresh air, all of that. It's a really important step in the process of trying to kind of get things settled down when you feel like everything's out of control. And of course, I already said it, I'm going to say it again, gratitude. When I'm in nature, I tend to be more grateful for the things around me. And that makes me look at everything with a more grateful perspective. So if you're really struggling to find anything good that's going on, then break out that journal, break out that piece of paper and stop and see if you can find one good thing to write down about the day, the situation. See if you can find that silver lining. When I started practicing more gratitude and learning to be grateful for what I had instead of just fussing about what I didn't have, I found it was a lot easier even in catastrophic situations to find something to be grateful for and find a silver lining. My daughter's car accident. She wasn't hurt. Was the car totaled? Yes. Was the car paid off? Yes, it was. Yay. Was she hurt? No. That was really important. So there's always something, even in the worst situations. I truly believe that if you look, there's always something positive you can find about it. And sometimes that doesn't happen until after you're through it. And then you look back and go, oh, now I understand. But if you can just find one positive thing, like you got up that day, or the neighbor down the street held the door for you when you ran into them at the grocery store, whatever, one tiny positive thing out of whatever catastrophe, good morning, Miss Kayla, is going on, super important. Gratitude will go a long way towards making everything that's going on around you seem a little bit less threatening, if that makes sense. And then, of course, faith. If you have a faith, whatever that faith is, Mother Earth, Buddha, God, the universe, whatever, immerse yourself in it. Utilize it. For me, I believe in God. So one of the first things I do now is pray. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I'm like, and then I realize that the best thing I can do at that moment is pray because it gives me peace. And especially if I can't talk to somebody else and I'm not in a place yet where I can write out my feelings, praying is where I go. And sometimes that looks like me on my knees like this, hardly saying a word other than, God, you know my heart. So super important. So those are, like I said, no matter what's going on, whatever the major loss is, whatever the major catastrophe is, a lot of these principles apply across the board. And even when you think, here's something important to remember, even when you think that nobody else could possibly understand what you're experiencing, no, you're right. There's a lot of people that can't understand whatever your personal experience is, but the emotions are very similar. And someone out there has experienced those emotions and probably can use these same methods to help get through it. So it's important to remember that you are not alone. They may not understand your unique experience, but someone does understand the emotion behind it. Another thing to remember, because I'm wrapping this up now, so the things I want you to remember. If you've lost a loved one, whether it's through death or because for whatever reason, you can't be near them anymore, you no longer have access to them. There's no timeline for grieving. Those 5 stages of grief I talked about, you can bounce around in there. Nobody should tell you that you should be over it by now. I myself have been guilty of judging people for publicly grieving long after the loss. But the truth is that you're the only one that knows your timeline. So again, whether it's the loss of a job, the loss of a person, a loved one, whether it's through death or a breakup or a family squabble or some other extenuating circumstance that takes that loved one away from you, your timeline is your timeline. But again, it's a good idea to make sure that you set time limits and allow yourself to be functional even through that timeline. Does that make sense? If it's really got a grip on you, then maybe you need professional help. If this is a grieving situation, there are a lot of grief support groups available. There are online grief support groups. Here locally, there are grief support groups. NAMI, you guys know I work part-time for NAMI. NAMI offers peer support groups. If you're living with a mental health condition, diagnosed or undiagnosed, then there's a peer support group for you. If you are taking care of a family member who is living with a mental health condition, and that's affecting you, then there's a support group for you. There are online options for seeking help. You can contact your primary care physician to get a reference for a counselor. There are a lot of ways to do it, but if you really feel like it's got a grip on you and you can't move forward, whatever it is, this catastrophe, if you feel like if it's turning into a depression or an anxiety you can't get past, then it's okay to seek professional help. It's perfectly fine. It is okay not to be okay. And then, of course, the final thing I want you to remember is that it will get better. In the moment, it may not seem like it will, but it will get better. All of these things we will learn from, we won't necessarily get over, but we will move forward, we will move past, and at some point, we will be able to look at that situation and say, yeah, that was ugly, but here's what came out of it. Most of the time, I find that to be the case. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to wrap it up, running a little bit long, but these are important things. And like I said, remember that no matter what it is you're experiencing that makes you feel like your world is turning upside down, a lot of these same principles can apply across the board regardless of the catalyst. So I hope you found that helpful. I hope that if you are feeling a little like things are a little bit out of control, that kind of helps you find a way to focus and muscle through it, and get to the other side. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Send me a message. And if you did find this helpful, please share. Somebody else might be helped by it as well. I hope you have a fabulous day, and most importantly, be well. Thank you. Bye.